The scent of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass usually meant serenity to Sarah Mitchell. Their home, nestled on the corner of a meticulously manicured cul-de-sac, was their suburban sanctuary. But serenity had a thin veneer, and today, that veneer was shattering like cheap glass against the immaculate. Oppressive force of their neighbor, Beatrice Albright, 6-year-old Maya, all sunshine and lisping questions, was kneeling by the boundary fence separating the Mitchells' cheerful, slightly overgrown garden from Beatrice's minimalist, zen-like landscape. Sarah was clipping rosemary nearby, humming softly. The fence was old cedar with a couple of horizontal planks slightly warped, leaving a narrow, dark gap just wide enough for a curious hand or a predatory paw. "Mommy, look!" Maya whispered, her voice tight with awe. "A ghost kitty." Sarah glanced over. Perched regally on Beatrice's side of the perfectly paved patio was Nimbus, Beatrice's show-quality white Persian cat. Nimbus was less a pet and more a feline sculpture, a $10,000 investment in fur and attitude. He was never ever outside. Beatrice insisted the outdoors was a chaotic den of infection and commoners. "Oh, wow," Sarah said, dropping her shears. He must have slipped out. "Don't touch, honey." Remember, he's a show cat, but Maya was already captivated. The cat, blinded perhaps by the bright afternoon sun, or simply stressed by its accidental exile, was tense. Its tail twitched, a nervous metronome against the cool patio stone. Maya, thinking she was offering comfort, gently slid 3 fingers through the small gap in the cedar. The change in Nimbus was instantaneous and terrifying. The feline sculpture dissolved into a blur of feral instinct. There was a low, rattling hiss, a sickeningly audible thwack, and then Maya's scream, a raw, high sound of pure pain and panic. Sarah covered the 10 feet between them in a desperate lunge, pulling Maya back from the fence. The child's arm, just above the wrist, was already blooming with 3 deep, parallel gashes. Blood beaded instantly, swelling into dark, angry lines. Oh, God, Maya," Sarah choked, scooping up her daughter. "It's okay, we're going inside. It's okay." They hadn't even made it to the back door when Beatrice Albright appeared, not running, but striding with the terrifying calm of someone who believed they were walking into a minor logistical error, not a crisis. She was impeccably dressed as always in cream linen, her severe blonde bob perfectly intact. "Sarah, what in the blazes happened?" Beatrice demanded, not looking at the crying child but scanning her side of the fence line. "Nimbus! Nimbus, are you all right, my precious boy? Did that child startle you?" Sarah paused, clutching her bleeding daughter, the adrenaline tasting like copper in her mouth. "Beatrice, your cat just attacked my daughter. She needs stitches, or at least a thorough cleaning. He cut her deep." Beatrice finally turned her attention to Maya, offering a quick, dismissive glance at the oozing wound. Well, what did she expect, shoving her grubby hand onto my property? Nimbus has protocols. He is an indoor animal. Do you realize the potential trauma you've caused him by letting your daughter— Beatrice, stop! Sarah cut her off, her voice low and trembling with contained rage. The only trauma here is my daughter bleeding. Your cat was unrestrained and aggressive. We're going to the urgent care clinic. We'll talk about this later. No, we will talk about this now, Beatrice countered, blocking the door. She held Nimbus, who was now purring a high, anxious rumble, close to her chest like a furry, fragile briefcase. He is trembling. This kind of sudden, unexpected panic could trigger his stress-induced hyperesthesia. I am taking him directly to the specialty feline clinic. They are the only ones who can properly assess the psychological and physical fallout of this assault. Sarah stared at her. Assault? He scratched my daughter. We are going to the emergency room and you're worried about your cat's feelings. He is highly sensitive, Sarah, and extremely valuable. I will not have my champion show line contaminated or traumatized by poorly supervised neighborhood children. Now, I suggest you retain your documentation of the child's treatment as I will be retaining mine, and I expect you to cover the full cost. After all, your daughter was the aggressor. The absurdity of the statement was like a physical blow. Sarah shoved past her and slammed the door, adrenaline lending her a terrifying strength. 40 minutes later, Maya had a clean, bandaged arm, a tetanus booster, and a small lollipop. The doctor had been clear. Deep scratch, watch for infection. Back home, Sarah was shaking as she relayed the conversation to David, her husband. Over the phone, she demanded we pay for her cat's vet bill. David's voice crackled with disbelief. For what? Anxiety medication for a Persian? She called Maya the aggressor, David. She is claiming Maya's hand entering her airspace caused Nimbus irreparable psychological harm. I swear, the woman is deranged. Sarah paced the kitchen floor, running a hand through her hair. She implied legal action. This isn't over. Don't worry about it. It's an empty threat. Let her pay for her psycho cat. We'll send her the bill for Maya's urgent care visit just to shut her up. David's confidence was comforting, but Sarah couldn't shake the dread. Beatrice wasn't loud or volatile. She was cold, calculating, and wealthy. She didn't threaten. She informed. Sarah spent the next hour documenting everything. Photos of Maya's wound, the doctor's notes, even the narrow gap in the fence. Just before she started dinner, her phone pinged with an email notification. The sender was an email address she didn't recognize. Albright Legal Services. She opened the attachment, a formal 6-page PDF. It wasn't an invoice. It was a demand for financial remediation. It detailed Beatrice Albright's expenses, an emergency feline stress and trauma consultation, orthopedic x-rays to check for any strain from the sudden jump, a prescribed course of feline anti-anxiety medication, and an itemized charge for loss of show readiness due to emotional compromise. The total amount demanded from the Mitchells, due in 7 days, $421.50. Sarah stared at the number, then down at Maya, who was quietly drawing pictures of a very sad, heavily bandaged bunny. The fear for her daughter's health instantly evaporated, replaced by a searing metallic contempt. It wasn't just the money. It was the audacious, privileged assumption of guilt. It was the valuation of a cat's trauma over a child's blood. Clenching the printout, Sarah walked to her laptop. She wasn't just going to reply. She was going to respond in kind. She pulled up the city's municipal code and typed in unconfined domestic animals and aggressive pet injury reporting. She typed out a fresh email to the Albright Legal Services address, attaching the urgent care bill for Maya's treatment, and a photo of the infected scratch. Dear Counsel, she typed, her fingers steady despite the fury in her chest. Please find attached the medical expenses for my daughter's injury caused by your client's unconfined animal. I expect full reimbursement within 7 days. Furthermore, be advised that the Mitchells have officially filed an incident report with animal control regarding an unconfined pet demonstrating aggressive behavior. We understand Nimbus is a valuable show cat. Aggressive behavior may impact that valuation, or worse, lead to necessary quarantine. This matter is now elevated. The counterclaim stands at $638.12. The clock is ticking. She hit send, the click of the mouse a gunshot in the silent house. Sarah leaned back. The absurd $4,000 bill for a cat's stress medication lying beside the $100 bill for a tetanus shot. This was no longer a disagreement. It was war, and Sarah had just called in the authorities. The retaliatory email Sarah sent was a missile launched from the heart of her fear. She expected an immediate, acidic response from Beatrice's counsel, but instead, she was met with a chilling, total silence that lasted almost 24 hours. That silence was worse than any shout. It felt like the calm before an avalanche. The first sign of the fallout arrived precisely at 11:17 a.m. Sarah was working in the kitchen, periodically checking Maya's bandaged arm, when a gray, official-looking pickup truck with the city seal, Animal Control, pulled up to Beatrice Albright's driveway. Sarah watched through the slightly parted blinds. The sight was, she admitted, deeply satisfying. A large, no-nonsense officer, clipboard in hand, strode up to Beatrice's pristine glass-paneled front door and rang the bell. Beatrice herself answered, dressed shockingly, in expensive athleisure wear, looking less like a showcat enthusiast and more like a CEO about to sign a hostile takeover. The conversation started with stiff, professional formality from the officer and glacial condescension from Beatrice. But Sarah saw the moment the officer mentioned the incident report and the need to inspect Nimbus. Beatrice's face, that carefully constructed mask of perpetual superiority, cracked. You are here about... The Mitchell incident? Beatrice's voice was audible even through the closed window, pitched high with outrage. This is an outrageous harassment. My cat is a prize-winning pedigree, registered and microchipped. He is not a feral dog, you quarantine! He is indoors, always. The officer, clearly accustomed to entitled pet owners, spoke calmly. Ma'am, the report alleges a scratch-causing injury to a minor and aggressive behavior. I need to verify the cat's health records, his registration, and confirm his current living situation. If he has a history of aggression, we are mandated to assess the need for a 10-day observation period. Beatrice's hand shot up to her chest, clutching her pale jade necklace. Observation period? Are you suggesting quarantine? This is slander! This is malicious retaliation! That child, ma'am, animal control does not adjudicate blame, the officer interrupted, tapping his clipboard. We assess risk. If the cat is exhibiting aggressive behavior outside its dwelling, it poses a risk. I need to see the animal and the documentation now, or I will file a non-compliance report, which carries a hefty fine and mandates immediate surrender. Sarah watched Beatrice's immaculate composure disintegrate. The prospect of an animal control tag, let alone the potential mandatory isolation contaminating Nimbus's perfect pedigree life, was clearly the greatest horror Beatrice had faced all year. She glowered over her shoulder, directly at Sarah's house, her eyes twin shards of ice. She didn't have to see Sarah to know who was behind this. The transaction between the two women, the original $4,121.50 demand versus the risk of Nimbus's quarantine, was a perfect, terrible exchange of power. Beatrice spat one last venomous word at the officer. Fine, but you have opened a legal abyss, officer. You have no idea what you've done, before slamming the door. The animal control truck left 10 minutes later. Sarah felt a brief, triumphant surge of adrenaline, thinking, that's what happens when you prioritize a cat's x-rays over a child's safety. That victory lasted exactly until David arrived home early. He parked his car, slammed the door, and walked up to the house, not with his usual easy gait, but with the tight, rapid steps of a man facing disaster. Sarah, what the hell is going on? He demanded the moment he crossed the threshold. He didn't even drop his briefcase. Sarah, who had been ready to share her victory, recoiled from his tone. What are you talking about? I sent her lawyer a counterclaim and filed a report with animal control, which just forced her to... I know what you did. That's the problem. David threw a crumpled, glossy piece of paper onto the kitchen island. It was a formal notification from the Homeowners Association, HOA, hand-delivered and stamped with the highest priority notice. Sarah picked it up. The title, printed in bold, angry red, read, Emergency Cease and Desist Order, Unapproved Structure Violation. What structure? Sarah frowned. The shed? We had approval for the shed 3 years ago. Not the shed, David sighed, rubbing his temples. The playset. The big cedar one we built for Maya's 5th birthday. The one that's been there for a year and a half. Beatrice is suddenly claiming the main vertical beam exceeds the allowed height for accessory structures by 5 inches and violates the sightline easement from her 3rd-story master bathroom window. The HOA, thanks to a very aggressive immediate action demand from her lawyer, the same one you just threatened, put a stop work order on us. They're demanding we dismantle it within 48 hours. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. That playset was Maya's fortress, their weekend project, the center of her childhood joy. Dismantling it was a multi-day nightmare, but the HOA signed off on the blueprints. I have the paperwork. Apparently, she found an obscure bylaw about structural protrusions in the western sightline corridor and hired a land surveyor this afternoon to prove it. She only cares because the upper deck of the playset faces directly onto her sunroom. This isn't about 5 inches, Sarah. This is about making Maya cry and costing us 4 weekends of labor to fix a problem that didn't exist until you filed that report. David's voice wasn't angry, but defeated, which was worse. We were doing fine just ignoring her ludicrous demands, but now you've escalated this to a property dispute. This is where she lives, Sarah, in property disputes. She owns the HOA president. She demanded we pay $5,000 for a cat's Xanax. Sarah yelled, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. What was I supposed to do, bow down and write the check? She put my child's safety second to a piece of furniture with fur. She needed to learn there are consequences, and she is teaching us there are bigger consequences. She didn't send a letter this time, Sarah. She targeted Maya's safe space. She's not playing for money anymore. She's playing for misery. The argument hung heavy in the air. David was right. Beatrice hadn't just fired back. She had targeted their home life, striking a painfully personal blow. Just then, a second email notification arrived, this time directly to Sarah's personal account. From the Albright Legal Services firm. Sarah clicked it open, her hand trembling. It wasn't about the playset. It was a single-paragraph response to her animal control threat. Dear Ms. Mitchell, we acknowledge receipt of your frivolous counterclaim and the filing of a malicious and unfounded report with animal control. Be advised that your actions against our client's valuable registered property now constitute deliberate tortious interference. While our client has withdrawn her initial demand for veterinary expenses, as she now views the entire matter as a hostile legal engagement, she is instead authorizing the initiation of a 7-figure civil suit against you and Mr. Mitchell for damages, punitive compensation related to defamation, and the estimated loss of Nimbus's future championship earnings caused by the psychological distress and forced quarantine procedure you initiated. Consider this your final pre-litigation warning. Expect service by the end of the week. Sarah dropped the phone. David rushed over and read the screen, his face turning gray. 7 figures. A multi-million-dollar lawsuit over a cat scratch and an animal control report. Beatrice hadn't just countered. She had raised the stakes to an impossible level, turning a simple neighborhood dispute into a financial guillotine hanging over their entire future. The battle over the playset was merely a distraction. The real war had just begun. The email sat between Sarah and David on the kitchen island, glowing with the cold, sterile light of corporate malice. 7 figures. The number wasn't a threat. It was an act of financial terrorism, calculated to annihilate them. It wasn't about justice. It was about demonstrating absolute power. This is insane, David muttered, running a hand over the bold black print. She can't sue us for millions because her cat got startled by a kid's finger. The judge will laugh her out of court. Will they? Sarah whispered, her voice tight. She has Albright Legal Services doing her pre-litigation. She's not using a divorce lawyer. She's using corporate guns. They've already tied up the HOA president on the playset issue, David. She is strategically competent, and she is playing a game we can't afford to lose. The immediate pressure was suffocating. The phone calls started first thing in the morning. They spoke to 3 litigation attorneys. The first asked for a $50,000 retainer just to reply to the pre-litigation letter. The second laughed nervously and suggested they settle immediately for whatever the Karen demanded. The third, a tired-sounding man specializing in neighborhood disputes, confirmed Sarah's fear. The claim itself is frivolous. Yes, the lawyer explained over speakerphone, his voice tinny and distant. But the cost of proving it's frivolous is not. A good lawyer will cost you $200,000 just to get through discovery. She knows that. She's banking on you folding because the cost of fighting is greater than the cost of losing your entire savings. The call ended, leaving a vacuum of dread in the Mitchell house. The second pressure point was the playset. The 48-hour deadline from the HOA was ticking down. Maya, sensing the electric anxiety radiating off her parents, was quiet. She watched David from the window as he reluctantly carried a ladder out back. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Maya asked, standing in the doorway, her injured arm held slightly stiffly. David managed a weak, false smile. "We're going to give the playset a little maintenance, sweetie. It's too tall according to the rules." "But I like being tall," Maya said, her bottom lip beginning to tremble. "I can see the ducks from up there." Sarah knelt down, pulling her into a fierce, protective hug. "I know, baby. We'll fix it. We'll make it even better. Just stay inside with Mommy for a little bit." David spent the next 3 hours wrestling with the sturdy cedar beams, his hammer blows echoing with frustration. Sarah watched from the kitchen, feeling a toxic mix of guilt and hardening resolve. Every swing of the hammer was Beatrice Albright winning a small, painful victory. Later that afternoon, David, exhausted and defeated, came back inside. "I can't do this, Sarah. We need to cut a deal. We pay the vet bill, sign an NDA, whatever it takes. We can't afford to go up against this. I just saw Beatrice on her porch watching me. She wasn't smiling. She was just observing the consequences of our defiance. The conflict, which had started with a cat, now fractured their marriage. If we fold now, David, she'll do this again, Sarah said, her voice dangerously calm. She'll know she can weaponize the law against us whenever she wants. We pay her $5,000 now, and next time when Maya's ball lands on her lawn, she'll charge us $10,000 for trespass contamination. We have to fight. But how? We can't afford the lawyer, and you're telling me we can't afford not to fight. We have to find a weak spot, something her corporate guns haven't covered. That idea, the need for a weak spot, sent a jolt of clarity through Sarah's panic. Beatrice wasn't a goddess of litigation. She was a woman with a cat who was obsessed with her pedigree. And obsession breeds documentation. Nimbus, Sarah murmured, walking quickly to her laptop. It's all about Nimbus. The whole 7-figure claim rests on the projected loss of his championship earnings and his psychological trauma. She started searching, not through legal databases, but through the opaque, hyper-specific world of competitive cat shows, Persian breeding associations, and pedigree registries. She searched under Nimbus Albright, Beatrice Albright, and even specialty feline clinic reviews. Hours passed in a blur of obscure forums, archived show results, and breeder blogs. She found dozens of photos of Nimbus, always posed on velvet cushions, always looking impossibly pristine. She found Beatrice's glowing profile as a top-tier platinum breeder. It was all flawless, perfectly curated, until she stumbled upon a forgotten, months-old thread in a smaller, regional cat forum dedicated to Persian health concerns and troubleshooting. The thread was titled, simply, Hairball or Hidden Disease. The original poster was anonymous, using the handle CatMumNowWhy, but the content was chillingly familiar. CatMumNowWhy. My champion male has been behaving erratically. Suddenly aggressive, extreme anxiety, and some localized fur loss around the tail base. The vet keeps saying it's stress, but he's barely eating. He was supposed to compete in the Triple Crown show last month, but I pulled him. Anyone else experience this? Sarah scrolled through the replies. Suggestions for specialized diets, pheromone diffusers. Then, 3 posts down, she saw a response that made her freeze. Beatrice's breeder. I know the breeder you're talking about, CatMumNowWhy. Let's just say some of those champion lines carry a silent genetic time bomb, polycystic kidney disease, PKD. It's rampant in high-dollar Persians. It causes chronic pain, which manifests as aggression and anxiety. She keeps sweeping it under the rug because a PKD-positive cat, even if it's asymptomatic, is immediately disqualified from championship lines, and its entire breeding value drops to 0. If you pulled him from the Triple Crown, you probably know the score. Get him tested immediately. Sarah stared at the post. The date was 9 months ago, long before the scratch incident. Extreme anxiety, aggression, pulled from competition. The symptoms matched Nimbus's behavior perfectly. She frantically searched for the name of the specialty feline clinic that Beatrice claimed to have taken Nimbus to for trauma. She found their website, and then, using an advanced search query, located a small, clinical article they had published 3 months ago on the ethical dilemmas of managing genetic diseases in high-value feline breeds. The article referenced a case. Study, case F4, an asymptomatic male Persian from a prize-winning line who was exhibiting behavioral issues. The article concluded, due to the potential for significant legal and financial liability, the owner of F4 was advised to manage the symptomatic behavior aggressively through anti-anxiety medication, while electing not to pursue definitive genetic testing for PKD, thus preserving the animal's championship eligibility. Sarah felt a surge of cold, electrifying certainty. Beatrice hadn't taken Nimbus to the clinic for trauma from Maya. She had taken him to manage a potentially career-ending, disqualifying genetic condition that she was actively concealing. The 7-figure lawsuit wasn't about Nimbus's future. It was about ensuring that no one was allowed to investigate Nimbus's past. If Sarah forced discovery, the genetic disease would come out, and Beatrice, the platinum breeder, would be exposed as a fraud whose cat was worthless. The seven-figure shadow suddenly seemed to have a massive structural crack. Sarah looked at the playset, half dismantled in the evening light. She no longer felt defeated. She felt dangerous. She picked up her phone and dialed the number for the tired, skeptical lawyer who had told her to settle. "Hello? I'm calling back. This is Sarah Mitchell, the cat scratch case. I have found the reason Beatrice Albright is suing us for millions. It's not about the cat's anxiety. It's about a hidden, disqualifying genetic disease that voids his entire pedigree. We have a defense counsel. Now tell me what information you need to send a countersuit for malicious prosecution."